So this may be heretical 2 days after Thanksgiving, but this morning I want to explore the case for being ungrateful. Wall Street Journal columnist Elizabeth Bernstein wrote this week a column called "The Case for Being Ungrateful," highlighting practitioners of a new kind of self-care. It's called the Anti-Gratitude Journal. One journaler opened up a fresh notebook and wrote at the top of the page, "Things I am ungrateful for." She began her list: car repairs, technical issues with her blog, weight gain, a friend who let her down. Another writer, a college student named Anna Sago, has turned anti-gratitude journaling into a daily practice. "I was surrounded with so much false positivity," explained Sago. "Journaling can help me just let all the negativity go." And so, sitting on the train on the way to Philadelphia on Wednesday, I began my own anti-gratitude journal. And I want to tell you, it was a major bummer. It was not self-care for me. Did not make me feel any better. Especially when I was sitting right next to my toddler, who fills my life with so much gratitude these days. And truthfully, the practice did not feel very Jewish. The very first words of our morning liturgy are Moda Ani, I am grateful. We wake up and before brushing our teeth, before checking our phones, before we do anything, we're supposed to open up the divine gratitude journal and say thank you. Gratitude and blessing, of course, they've been built into our tradition for hundreds and hundreds of years, right from the outset. The rabbis encourage each of us to say 100 blessings every single day. And they're suggesting that the primary way that we imitate God is by reciting blessings. Put other words, to be grateful is to be godly. So Jewish tradition asks us to be grateful, and yet it also asks us not to push away our misfortune. God is the creator of all, and the sages also suggest that it's not really up to us to decide what to be grateful for and what to put on our anti-gratitude journals. The Mishnah teaches this: one is obligated to recite a blessing for the bad that befalls them, just as one recites a blessing for the good that befalls them. Jewish tradition provides words of blessing that one should recite when a person hears both good news and bad news. When one receives good news, they say the blessing that ends with the words, Hatov v'hametiv, you God are good and you do good. And when one confronts bad news, they say, Baruch dayan ha'emet, blessed is the judge of truth. These are the words that we say at a funeral as we rip the kriya ribbon that represents our external grieving, or externally represents our internal grieving. The Talmud is noting that both of these are expressions of blessing to God despite the very different textures and types of news. The rabbis of the Talmud, they read this Mishnah really closely and suggest that one must bless bad news and good news in the exact same way. They're engaging in an ancient Near Eastern polemic, really. Instead of a religion in which good and evil are brought down by different entities, we have one God. And our one God is responsible for all of creation, both good and bad. But is it really possible to welcome bad news in the same way that we welcome good? It doesn't seem so. At first glance, this is an endorsement of a theodicy of which I personally don't subscribe. I feel uncomfortable with the idea that to be a God-committed Jew would mean that we must accept bad news or natural disaster or personal and communal calamity with a sense of joy. I don't think that Judaism is a religion that romanticizes suffering. It doesn't endorse suffering in this life only with the promise of a better future in the next. We pray to a God who listens to our tears. We're expected and perhaps sometimes even encouraged to cry. And loss and grief, they shape our lives in significant and permanent ways. Loss can be bad and incredibly shattering. I wouldn't wish it often upon anyone. Even if it will eventually lead to lessons learned, Too often there is no good and there is no joy. To treat our grief in the way that we treat good news feels like it collapses all of our experiences and doesn't necessarily take seriously the hurt and the pain that we feel. So what might it mean then when the Talmud teaches that one should greet both good news and bad news, both our gratitude and, well, our anti-gratitude, in the same manner? Rambam in the Mishnah Torah, his compendium of Jewish law, explains that this Jewish obligation to greet both good and bad news in the same way is really about greeting both kinds of news with humility. He writes, although many matters may originally look unfavorable, ultimately they will bring good. Conversely, there are many things which at the outset appear good and ultimately are very bad. Therefore, an understanding person should not become aggrieved when beset with difficulties, because they do not know the ultimate outcome. Rambam suggests that the rabbinic declaration is really an invitation to approach the world with humility. How often do we wish that a situation would have turned out differently? We might say, if only she had won the election, if only I got that promotion, if only my kid had gotten into that university, life would be so much better in all of these ways. And Rambam reminds us, sure, maybe it would be, and maybe not. We don't know. And sometimes what we thought we originally wanted could have turned out to be the worst option indeed. Perhaps categorizing our lives into the good and the bad is based on the false idea that we already know the end of the story. Rambam later explains that he's not suggesting that we can't pray for outcomes which we desire. He simply warns us against conflating the means with the ends. But what about the bad news that we know is bad? When we lose a loved one far too soon, when we see violence that isn't stopping, when we know that cruelty and fear seem to be winning. The suggestion here, when we know the outcome is bad outright, may have a different justification than just humility. Here, holding pain and joy in the same regard invites us to understand that we can hold our grief without becoming it. That our innate goodness transcends all the good and all the bad that we might encounter. In her book, It's Okay That You Are Not Okay, therapist Megan Devine explains that too many of us have been forced into a false choice about how we confront grief and pain. She writes, we've got this idea that there's only two options in grief. You're either going to be stuck in your pain, doomed to spend the rest of your life in a corner in your basement wearing sackcloth, or you're going to triumph over grief, be transformed, and come back even better than you were before. Just two options, on and off, eternally broken or completely healed. There's a whole middle ground between these two extremes, but we don't know how to talk about it. By neither turning away nor by rushing redemption, but rather by standing there, right there, inside the obliterated universe, by somehow making a home there, by changing our orientation to grief as a problem to be solved, and instead to see it as an experience to be carried and a mystery to be honored. This new model of grief is not in cleaning it up and making it go away. It's in finding new and beautiful ways to inhabit what hurts, to carry it with us, and to integrate it into our lives. Megan Devine understands what the rabbis understand. That the good and bad of our lives, as she writes it, is a mystery to be honored. We can welcome all that we confront, even ever mindful that as we carry it, we will continue to change and grow as well. Knowing that we never get over grief, but we do change. It becomes a part of us, the beautiful selves that we are. And it acknowledges that we are beautiful because of our wounds, not despite them. So, should we start keeping anti-gratitude lists? Truthfully, I don't recommend it. Science has shown that those who set practices of gratitude experience better sleep, less stress, lower blood pressure, and many other health benefits. And we have a choice how we tell the story of our lives. By striving to say 100 brachot each day, we invite ourselves to center our story around joy. But I know that even without prompting, I also often find myself making anti-gratitude lists anyway. And my push this Thanksgiving weekend is not to push these intrusive thoughts away, but to honor them along with the good. Perhaps even say a blessing for them. Not because I'm happy that misfortune exists in the world, but because I have the opportunity to live with humility that I don't know the end of my story, and with courage that the bad news in my life won't define me, and with hope that the end will be better. This week I've been thinking a lot about the rabbinic sage Nachum Ish Gamzu. The Talmud explains that Nachum, the man from Gamzu, was also called this because of the phrase that he was known to say, Gamzu l'tovah. This also will turn out for good. And the Talmud tells stories of Nachum experiencing seemingly terrible events, and then by the grace, by the rachamim of God, overcoming them. And sometimes the person that wishes to have harmed Nachum becomes harmed in the end of the story. Nachum Ish Gamzu becomes the poster sage for a type of Jewish theodicy. All of it will turn out for good. God has a plan. But perhaps there's also some wisdom in not including the last word, tovah, of really just saying gamzu and this. Perhaps this is the true theodicy of Talmud Brachot, of Megan Divine, and even of the anti-gratitude journals. To let the experience of our lives wash over us, to honor its mystery, and to let it grow with us. To wake up each day and to feel every experience fully. To feel each moment and gently notice it, and to whisper, gamzu, 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 and this, and this, and this, and this. Shabbat shalom.